talk to the head of democracy assessment of the IDEA, Seema Shah, who joins us live from Brussels. Well, this report is saying that the world has become more authoritarian in the past year. Precisely what role did the pandemic play in all of this?
The pandemic played a very big role in it, but what we found was the pandemic actually exacerbated conditions that were already existing. And so what we found is that democracies that were already ailing in some way were particularly impacted. So COVID-19 impacted countries in the same way that it impacted people. If you had a pre-existing condition, you were much more likely to be impacted and impacted severely.
We had about 4 successive military takeover. This report talks about the fact that elections hold, but the real tenet of democracy doesn't reflect from these particular electoral practices. What recommendations are you bringing forth?
In terms of elections, what we found was that countries around the world really proved their resilience when it came to elections, because what we found was that as time went on, the number of postponed elections dramatically decreased, which showed us that election management bodies around the world were learning how to innovate quickly and allow people to continue exercising their right to participate, even in exceedingly difficult conditions. So one of the things we recommend is that electoral management bodies really take stock of what special voting arrangements worked and why they worked, and then think about how to institutionalize those so that they are not used just in times of crisis, but they're used more regularly. Because one of the things we found was that often those special voting arrangements were reaching parts of the population that have long been marginalized, even without considering the pandemic. So it's now important to retain that reach even after the pandemic ends. So that's one recommendation.
The report talks about the need for democracy to become more innovative and evolve with time. How does the global community intend to effect this?
Excuse me. What we recommend the global community to do is to follow our agenda. We lay out an agenda for democratic renewal, which is based on 3 pillars. One is delivering new social contracts. Governments must deliver new social contracts to their people that address things like all kinds of inequality, corruption, environmental sustainability. Democracies need to prove to the people that they can deliver the things that people want and that people need to live their lives with dignity and pursue the opportunities important to them. That's one. 2 is to rebuild. So rebuild institutions in a way that is people-centered rather than elite-centered. And this really means disturbing the status quo. Right now is the time to be bold. So we have to think about how to sort of upend the vested interests in maintaining the status quo and make institutions come into the 21st century in a way that facilitates participation and facilitates broad participation. And then the third is to prevent rising authoritarianism and democratic backsliding. And the way we do that is by promoting accountability. And so one of the things we recommend, particularly in the African region, is to really take more advantage of the regional bodies and the courts, and the courts in Africa really have come out in recent years to show that they are a force to be reckoned with. And so we encourage regional bodies to take a more active role, and for governments and people to demand more involvement and more accountability from regional bodies.
The people demanding from government, we've seen a lot of clampdown on social activism in developing countries. How do you ask government to do more in climes like this?
I mean, this is part of the discussion, right? We need to figure out what the protests around the world have shown is that people are not willing to just sit back and take it. They will continue to demand change and demand reform, which is really a sign that democracy is in many ways alive and well. So what we recommend is that we start having conversations between governments and the people to figure out what a new form of democracy might look like. And one thing which we have seen work is the use of citizens' assemblies around the world. So you have randomly selected citizens come together, learn about a topic from experts, hear about that topic from people who have been impacted by it, and then sit down together as a group of citizens and come up with recommendations or come up with solutions. And what we have seen from those examples is better informed decision making, more public confidence, and successful breaking of deadlock. And so we really think at IDEA that citizens' assemblies could be a first starting point for having conversations between elected leaders and people.
I will look forward to much of that. I had U.S. President Joe Biden summit on issues of democracy coming up later in December. Head of Democracy Assessment, International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, Seema Shah. Thank you for talking to us tonight.
Thank you so much.